Mentioned the name of Derek Hanekom, who himself is a former member of the ANC's NEC, but also played an important role chairing the disciplinary panel that started the first process, or held the first process, that led to the expulsion of Julius Malema. He was leader of the ANC Youth League at that time. Derek Hanekom joins us now. Derek, good morning to you and thank you for your time. And I remember being in the room, watching you. Your iPad was very chatterig, I seem to recall, on the day. And we all remember how important it was, that moment, when you were chairing a process that was an important step on the journey to the expulsion of Julius Malema. At the time, he was an ANC Youth League leader. Did you ever think back then that a former leader of the ANC would one day be expelled in the way that Jacob Zuma probably will?
Hi, Stephen. No, of course, we had no inkling of, the developments that were to come. And if somebody had told me at the time that a president of the ANC in a few years' time would be charged with a misconduct and expelled from the ANC, I would have found it quite difficult to believe. But this is what's happened. I can't comment on the particular case. I can only speak about processes and procedures, Stephen, because, as you know, I'm no longer on the disciplinary committee.
No, of course. I mean, we've had the decision by one panel. How does the appeal process work? And I presume that you will hear an argument from Zuma. In this case, he would be represented by a person he's chosen, Tony Yengeni.
I think his chances of success in an appeal would be very, very slim. The first test is whether he lodged his appeal within a 3-week period, because that's what the Constitution stipulates. That anyone wanting to appeal has to do it within 21 days of the sanction having been adopted or approved by the NDC. So if he put in his appeal within that 21-day period, he's entitled to appeal. However, the NDC and the appeal goes to the National Disciplinary Committee of Appeals that is chaired by Johnny DeLonge, not Ralph Ngijima. Ralph Ngijima chairs the National Disciplinary Committee, which made the decision to expel him. They actually had very little choice, Stephen, because the Constitution of the ANCs spells out 22 acts of misconduct that members can be charged on and be found guilty of. But some of them, the ANC Constitution stipulates that the members will be ineligible to retain their membership if they're found guilty of those particular charges. And one of them is a Rule 25.17.14, but it's basically standing in an election for local, provincial, and national government, or acting as the election agent or canvasser of a person standing in such election, etc. But standing for another party in opposition to the ANC, the Constitution says that this only allows for expulsion, nothing short of that.
I mean, it does, frankly, and I say this not as an ANC member, of course, but as a journalist, some things are pretty open and shut and you kind of know what's going to happen. Some things are obvious. We've never had a person campaigning for two separate parties in our democratic era, insofar as I know. What I would like to ask, though, is that how long can all of this take once the case has actually been heard? And also, the NEC, as I understand it, kind of makes the final decision. Is that still the case? And would that mean we'd only get a final decision probably in December, in that meeting?
No, that is actually not the case. As soon as the appeal is heard by the National Disciplinary Committee of Appeals, that's final. The only review that can go to the NEC is on procedural unfairness. Then the NEC has the right to consider such an appeal, but only on grounds of procedural unfairness, not on the actual sanction, not on the disciplinary process, unless there was something procedurally unfair. So the NDCA will have the last word on this matter. And as I said, they hardly have much choice but to uphold the sanction imposed, the expulsion imposed by the NDC. It is a bit odd that somebody who doesn't recognize, in his words, the Ramaphosa ANC is going to the Ramaphosa ANC's disciplinary committee, National Disciplinary Committee of Appeal, to appeal the sanction imposed on him by the Ramaphosa ANC. So it's a bit odd, to say the least, that he does and he doesn't. He recognizes the ANC and its processes, but he's the leader of another party, and he chooses not to recognize the so-called Ramaphosa ANC. It's all a bit odd, but I guess from Jacob Zuma, you can expect nothing less than odd behavior.
Sure. Look, a lot's changed in our politics. I would like to ask a philosophical question about disciplinary processes in political parties, if I may, based on your experience, Derek.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have a disciplinary process that is not political? So, I mean, and you've chaired these in the past, where they have to make a finding, but at the same time, this is a political party, and this is not just, the ANC. I think this would be a question that applies to probably all political parties in democracies. There will always be an accusation that a disciplinary process is being used for political purposes, and that this can go in many directions. I don't know if you can actually remove one from the other.
Well, in some ways you can't. And in other ways, I mean, this particular rule dealing with organizational discipline or section of the ANC Constitution is very elaborate and puts a great deal of emphasis on fairness and giving members the opportunity to present their case. There are processes to be followed before charges are initiated. And then members have the right to defend themselves once they have been charged. The Constitution is also very clear that it can't be used to stifle debate. It can't be used to let's say, victimize a person on political grounds. But of course, you can't separate the two, because the National Disciplinary Committee is not a court of law. It upholds the constitution of the ANC. There are judgment issues always. Has a person brought the organization into disrepute, for example? That's essentially a political judgment, but the National Disciplinary Committee must make such a judgment and has to act in the interests of the organization, the ANC. That goes without saying. So you can't entirely separate the two. That is true. But having said that, the processes are very elaborate, very fair, and giving anyone who is charged ample opportunity to defend themselves and even opportunity to appeal. So, very unlike the very party that Jacob Zuma heads, where they say, well, we believe in democratic centralism or something like that, and the party leader just decides on who gets chucked out of the party. That's not the ANC. That's not the way the ANC operates. Not wanting to repeat myself, but the processes are extraordinarily fair and elaborate, and the Constitution spells out in great detail the processes that have to be followed.
Derek Hanekom, really appreciate the insights. Thank you very much indeed. Former chair of the ANC's disciplinary panel, former member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC.